Far off the coast of present-day Chile, the Juan Fernández Islands rise from the Pacific Ocean. Steep ridges lift directly from deep water. Volcanic rock forms high slopes broken by valleys where fresh water runs toward the sea. Dense vegetation covers much of the land, including grasses, shrubs, and tall trees in sheltered areas. The climate is mild but variable. Ocean winds move clouds quickly across the sky. Rain arrives in brief periods, then clears. Temperatures rarely reach extremes. Seabirds circle the cliffs. Fur seals gather along certain shores. Apart from wildlife, the islands remained largely unvisited in the early 18th century. Passing ships sometimes sighted them, but few stopped. Distance from regular routes kept the islands quiet, surrounded by open water and long horizons. Into this environment came a Scottish sailor named Alexander Selkirk. He was born in 1676 in Lower Largo, a coastal village in Fife. His father was a shoemaker and tanner. Like many young men from maritime towns, Selkirk turned to the sea early. Records show involvement in local disputes during his youth, but also steady movement toward a seafaring life. By the early 1700s, Selkirk was sailing on privateering voyages. Privateers operated with government permission to attack and seize enemy ships during wartime. These voyages were commercial as well as military. Crews hoped for profit from captured cargo. Conditions aboard were strict, and discipline mattered. Selkirk served as a sailing master, a role requiring navigational skill, knowledge of winds and currents, and oversight of a ship's handling. Such experience indicates competence and trust from officers. In 1703, he joined an expedition led by William Dampier, an experienced navigator and privateer. The voyage aimed to operate against Spanish shipping along the Pacific coast of South America. The expedition included the ship Cinque Ports, where Selkirk was assigned. Long voyages of this type involved uncertainty. Ships were exposed to storms, disease, and hull damage far from repair facilities. Crews relied on rationing, maintenance, and navigation to manage risk. Profit motivated the journey, but endurance sustained it. By 1704, the expedition had crossed into the Pacific. Ships showed wear from months at sea. Worm damage to wooden hulls was a known problem in warm waters. Leaks were common and sometimes serious. Officers and crew often disagreed about a vessel's condition. Selkirk's experience placed him in a position to judge seaworthiness. His assessments would soon shape his fate. In September 1704, the Cinque Ports reached the Juan Fernández Islands, off the coast of present-day Chile. One of these islands, then known as Masa Tierra, offered fresh water and a place to make repairs. After months at sea, the stop was practical. Inspection of the ship raised concern. The hull showed signs of serious wear. Leakage had increased. Selkirk believed the vessel was no longer safe for extended sailing. Surviving accounts from later depositions state that he warned the ship might not survive the next stages of the voyage. The captain, Thomas Stradling, did not share this conclusion. Disagreements between officers were not rare on privateering voyages, where authority and profit were closely linked. A delay for major repairs meant lost opportunity. Selkirk insisted the ship was unfit. He requested to remain on the island rather than continue aboard. Such a request was highly unusual but not impossible. Sailors were sometimes set ashore for discipline or choice, though rarely in such remote places. Stradling agreed to leave him. Whether this was done in frustration or confidence in the ship is unclear. Selkirk was put ashore with personal belongings, a musket, powder, bullets, a knife, a hatchet, bedding, clothing, and a Bible. He also had some navigational instruments. These items were typical possessions, not a survival kit. At first, Selkirk reportedly expected the captain to reconsider. Ships often delayed departure for water or wood. But the Cinque Ports sailed away. No return followed. From the shore, Selkirk could see the ship diminish on the horizon. The decision, once theoretical, became permanent. He was alone on the island. Masa Tierra was uninhabited but not barren. Fresh water flowed from streams that descended from higher ground. The climate was temperate, with wet winters and milder summers. Forested areas held cabbage palms and other vegetation introduced decades earlier by visiting sailors. Goats, left by previous expeditions, had multiplied on the island. Rats were also present, arriving from ships. Selkirk's first period on shore was defined by adjustment. Contemporary sources describing his later account indicate that he remained near the coast at first, where he had been landed. The shoreline allowed him to watch for returning ships. Over time, he moved inland where resources were more reliable. Food came from what the island already held. Goats provided meat and, eventually, skins. Cabbage palm offered edible pith. Wild turnips grew in some areas. Selkirk hunted using his musket while powder lasted. After ammunition became limited, he relied more on pursuit and trapping. Accounts from Captain Woodes Rogers, who later rescued him, state that Selkirk became skilled at running down goats on foot, a practice that required endurance and familiarity with the terrain. Fire was essential. Maintaining it reduced the constant need to relight it in damp conditions. Shelter evolved from simple use of natural cover to constructed huts. Reports describe 2 huts built from wood and thatched with long grass. One was used for cooking, the other for sleeping. This separation reduced fire risk and smoke exposure. Clothing deteriorated over time. Sailors' garments were not designed for years of wear. Selkirk eventually fashioned replacements from goatskins, using a nail or small tools to shape them. Such methods were consistent with practices known among mariners and hunters of the period. Rats created a problem at night, especially around stored food. Selkirk reportedly tamed feral cats on the island, which reduced infestations. This detail appears in multiple historical retellings and aligns with known animal behavior in isolated ecosystems. Timekeeping grew less precise. Without a working calendar, he measured time by seasons and routine. His Bible served as reading material and structure. Woodes Rogers later recorded that Selkirk read scripture regularly, which provided familiarity and order rather than spectacle. Physical condition changed. Rogers described him as strong and agile when found, suggesting that sustained activity preserved his fitness despite isolation. Yet the risk of injury remained constant. One recorded incident notes that Selkirk once fell while chasing goats and lay injured for a period before recovering. The account does not specify exact duration, only that the injury limited his movement. Daily life followed repetition. Hunting, gathering, maintaining shelter, tending fire, and scanning the sea from high points became regular tasks. No evidence suggests elaborate signaling systems beyond fires and visible presence. Ships rarely passed close enough to notice. This phase of survival depended on steady adaptation, not single acts. Skills learned at sea transferred to land in modified form. Practical decisions extended his time. The island did not change, his understanding of it did. Years passed in this manner. Years in isolation did not pass without strain. Even where food and water were available, uncertainty remained constant. Selkirk's survival depended on continued physical ability. Any illness or serious injury could have ended his self-sufficiency. On an island without other people, recovery relied entirely on time and personal resilience. Historical accounts emphasize that loneliness shaped much of his experience. Woodes Rogers later wrote that Selkirk had nearly forgotten human speech patterns when first approached. This suggests long periods without conversation. Silence was not an occasional condition but a steady background. The human voice, when unused, becomes unfamiliar even to its owner. Psychological effects are difficult to measure from surviving records. Selkirk left no diary from the island itself. What is known comes from later interviews and the observations of those who met him after rescue. These sources indicate that he maintained routine and religious reading, which likely provided mental structure. Still, routine does not remove isolation, it only organizes it. Food supply, though generally reliable, was never guaranteed. Goats could move to different parts of the island. Weather could reduce hunting success. Periods of rain made firewood harder to maintain. A wet climate required constant attention to dryness. If fire was lost, restarting it without flint or preserved embers would be difficult. For that reason, he guarded it carefully. Injuries posed recurring risk. The recorded fall during a goat chase illustrates how quickly survival could narrow. A broken limb or deep wound would have limited hunting and gathering. On remote islands, minor injuries can become major threats through infection. No detailed medical account survives, but the danger would have been understood by any sailor of the era. There were also moments when ships appeared but did not bring rescue. One documented event describes two Spanish vessels approaching the island. Selkirk attempted to signal them but then hid when he realized they were Spanish. At the time, Britain and Spain were enemies in the War of the Spanish Succession. As a Scottish privateer associated with English expeditions, capture by Spanish sailors could have meant imprisonment or forced labor. According to later reports, Spanish landing parties searched the island but did not find him. This incident shows that not every sighting of a sail meant safety. Such near encounters could affect morale. A ship on the horizon represented possibility. When it passed or proved dangerous, the island returned to silence. Hope had to be managed carefully. Expectation without result could weaken judgment. Selkirk's decision to hide from Spanish ships reflects calculated caution rather than desperation. Seasonal cycles repeated. Wet periods alternated with drier months. Vegetation grew and receded. Selkirk adjusted his movement patterns accordingly, shifting between coastal and inland areas. His huts required maintenance. Thatch needed replacement. Wood rotted in damp air. Survival demanded repair as much as procurement. Clothing made from goatskin also required upkeep. Animal hide stiffens with moisture and time. Softening and reshaping it would have been regular tasks. Protection from exposure remained a daily concern, especially at night when temperatures dropped. Isolation also alters perception of time. Without social markers such as conversation, shared meals, or communal work, days can blend. Selkirk reportedly marked time through observation and scripture reading, but exact calendars likely faded. The difference between months and years becomes less distinct when measured only by seasons. No record suggests that he attempted to build a seaworthy craft for escape. The materials, tools, and navigational certainty required would have been beyond practical reach for one man. Staying alive on land was more realistic than risking open water alone. This decision reflects restraint. Survival often depends on recognizing which risks not to take. His world narrowed to the island's boundaries. Within those limits, he developed familiarity with terrain, animal paths, and water sources. Familiarity can reduce danger, but it can also create monotony. The same ridges, the same valleys, the same shorelines formed the entire known world. Despite these pressures, Selkirk endured. The historical record shows no extended period of incapacity or collapse. His continued survival indicates that his methods, while simple, remained effective. He did not conquer the island, he adapted to it. The margin between survival and failure stayed thin, but it held. In February 1709, after more than 4 years on the island, change came through routine navigation rather than search. 2 English privateering ships, the Duke and the Duchess, approached the Juan Fernández Islands. They were part of an expedition led by Woodes Rogers, sailing in the Pacific during the War of the Spanish Succession. The ships sought water and provisions, a common reason to anchor near these islands. Selkirk saw the vessels from shore. Unlike earlier sightings, these ships flew English colors. That distinction mattered. He moved to make contact, reportedly using fire and visible movement to draw attention. Rogers's crew sent a boat to investigate the shoreline. Accounts from Rogers and his officers describe the first encounter. They found a man dressed in animal skins, carrying himself with confidence but speaking with some difficulty. His appearance showed long exposure to weather. His beard was grown. His clothing was made from goatskin. He carried tools he had fashioned himself. Rogers recorded that Selkirk seemed healthy and physically capable. He could run swiftly and move across terrain with ease. His diet of goat meat and vegetables had sustained him. The crew noted that he recovered normal speech patterns after some time among them, suggesting that the earlier difficulty was temporary and related to long solitude. Identification followed. Selkirk explained that he had been left on the island years earlier after a dispute with his captain. Members of the expedition recognized the plausibility of his account. His knowledge of the island's water sources also proved immediately useful to the ships, which needed fresh supplies. There was no ceremony to his departure. He boarded the Duke and re-entered maritime life. His skills, sharpened by isolation, made him valuable. Rogers later employed him as a mate. The transition from solitude to shipboard routine was practical. Work resumed. Watches, duties, and hierarchy returned. The island receded behind the ships as they sailed. Selkirk did not leave written reflections from that moment. What survives are the logs and narratives of the officers who recorded his condition and competence. Their tone is observational rather than dramatic. Rescue, in this case, did not come from a search mission or planned recovery. It came because ships still crossed the Pacific for trade and privateering. The same maritime networks that had placed Selkirk in danger also made his recovery possible. His isolation ended without spectacle. A boat landed. A man boarded. The voyage continued. Alexander Selkirk returned to a world that moved faster than the island he had left. His survival did not change navigation practices or eliminate maritime risk. It added a record. One more account of endurance shaped by routine, skill, and restraint. The island remained. Goats continued to roam its slopes. Wind and surf followed familiar patterns. Selkirk's years there altered neither landscape nor sea. What endured was the example, survival achieved not through drama, but through steady adaptation over time.